I'm Russell Mercer, 58 years old, and I've spent 30 years building custom homes around Asheville, North Carolina. I thought I knew every creak in my own house and every expression on my wife's face. Apparently, I didn't. My wife, Denise, is 56 and runs administration at a small hospital outside town. We've been married 32 years and have one daughter, Leah, who's 30 and lives in Tennessee with her husband and our first grandson. For the most part, life had settled into that quiet stage people call comfortable. Sometimes comfortable is just another word for distracted. It started on a rainy Thursday. I came home early because a delivery of lumber had been delayed. As I walked up the driveway, I saw our neighbor, Gerald, standing on the porch holding a small brown package. "Courier dropped this at my place by mistake," he said. Before I could answer, Denise came out of the front door so fast it startled both of us. "I'll take it," she said. "Not, thank you." "Not, what is it?" "Just, I'll take it." She practically pulled the package from Gerald's hands. I've been married long enough to recognize panic when I see it. I didn't say anything. Men my age know that silence can tell you more than questions. She carried the package straight through the house and into the garage. 10 minutes later, she came back inside empty-handed. "What was that?" I asked. "Oh, nothing important. Just some paperwork." Paperwork. She couldn't even look me in the eye. I let it go, at least on the surface. But that night I noticed something else. Denise checked the garage twice before bed. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I stepped into the garage to grab my drill charger. The package was sitting behind an old paint can. And on the front of the envelope, written in black marker, were 3 words. "For Russell Mercer only." I stood there staring at my own name. Then I heard the bathroom door open inside the house. And suddenly I knew this package was the beginning of something much bigger. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. That's something age teaches you. The first reaction is usually the worst one. I slipped the package back behind the paint can and walked into the kitchen just as Denise came down the hallway. She looked at me, then toward the garage door. A tiny glance. Less than a second. But I caught it. "You sleep okay?" she asked. "Like a rock." Another lie in a marriage that suddenly seemed to have too many of them. I spent the day repairing cabinets at a client's house, but my mind stayed in that garage. Why would someone send me a package and address it through my wife? Why hide it? Why not simply hand it to me? That evening I tried something simple. "Anything interesting happen today?" I asked over dinner. "No. Same old thing." I nodded. "No deliveries?" Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Just office papers." There it was again. Not a misunderstanding. Not forgetfulness. A deliberate choice. Men, what would you think at that point? After dinner, Denise went upstairs to fold laundry. I walked into the garage and finally opened the envelope. Inside was an old photograph. I almost dropped it. The picture had been taken nearly 20 years earlier. It showed me, Denise, our daughter Leah, and my younger brother Victor at a lake cabin we used to rent every summer. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten note. "You deserve to know what she gave up for this family. Ask her about October 2007. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just one date. October 2007. I stood there trying to remember. Back then Leah had just started college. I was working insane hours because the housing market was getting shaky. Denise had seemed tired all the time, but so had I. Nothing about that year stood out. Yet someone had gone to the trouble of mailing me an old family photo and a cryptic message. I slid the picture back into the envelope. Then I heard footsteps. Denise was standing in the doorway of the garage. She looked at the open package, then at my face. And for the first time in 32 years of marriage, I saw genuine fear in my wife's eyes. I thought I finally understood what was happening. I was wrong. Denise didn't yell. She didn't try to snatch the envelope from my hands. She just looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for far too long. "Where did you get that?" she asked quietly. "It had my name on it." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Russell, I was trying to figure out how to tell you." "Tell me what? And who sent this?" She didn't answer. That bothered me more than the package. I pulled out a chair from my workbench and sat down. "I'm not angry. But I need the truth." She leaned against the freezer in the garage and folded her arms. "Do you remember October of 2007? I remember working too much and worrying about money." A sad smile crossed her face. "That's exactly what you remember." Then she walked back into the house. I followed her into the kitchen, where she poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. "I need a minute," she said. I gave her one. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my younger brother, Victor. He answered on the second ring. "Russ? Everything okay? Did you send me an old photograph?" Silence. Long silence. That told me more than words. Finally he sighed. "So it finally got there." I sat down. "You sent it?" "Yeah." "Why?" Another pause. "Because I couldn't keep the secret anymore." I felt my stomach tighten. "What secret?" Victor lowered his voice. "In 2007, your company was 3 weeks away from collapsing." I rubbed my forehead. I remembered those days all too well. "You had loans everywhere," he continued. "You thought you were protecting everybody by hiding how bad it was." I looked toward the kitchen. Denise was staring out the window. "What does that have to do with her?" His answer came slowly. "Everything." Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Ask your wife what happened to her mother's inheritance." I nearly dropped the phone. Her mother had left her a sizable inheritance years ago. A fund she always called her safety net. As far as I knew, it was still sitting untouched. I ended the call and walked into the kitchen. Denise turned around before I spoke. She already knew. I held up the photograph. "What happened to your inheritance?" She covered her mouth with one hand. And then she started to cry. What she said next would change the way I looked at our entire marriage. Denise sat at the kitchen table and cried quietly for nearly a minute. I didn't interrupt her. After 32 years together, I knew the difference between tears meant to avoid a conversation and tears that had been waiting years to come out. Finally she looked up. "The inheritance is gone." I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Gone where?" "Into your company." I stared at her. She nodded. "In October of 2007, the bank was getting ready to call your loans. You were working 18 hours a day. You weren't sleeping. You kept saying that if the business failed, you had failed our family." I remembered those days. Barely. They felt like another lifetime. "You didn't know it," she said, "but I met with our accountant, Martin. He showed me the numbers." I frowned. "Martin knew. He begged me not to tell you afterward." I leaned back in my chair. "How much?" She swallowed. "Almost all of it." I couldn't speak. Her mother had left her nearly $300,000. Money she could have kept for herself. Money for retirement. Security. "You gave it to me." "No," she said softly. "I gave it to us." The room went quiet. Then she told me the part that hurt the most. "I didn't tell you because I knew your pride. If I had offered the money, you would have refused it. You would have lost the business trying to save it by yourself." I hated that she was right. Men can carry pride like a backpack full of bricks. But why keep it secret all these years? She looked down at her hands. Because lately you've been talking about retirement. About selling the company. About how well I planned for our future. Her voice cracked. You kept thanking me for protecting my inheritance. I finally understood. She wasn't hiding an affair. She wasn't hiding another family. She was hiding a sacrifice. And Victor knew. She nodded. He was the one who helped move the money quietly. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over our backyard. For 15 years I believed I had saved my company through hard work and stubbornness. The truth was harder. I hadn't saved it alone. I turned around and looked at my wife. She looked terrified. As if after all these years she might lose me because she had loved me too much. I thought the mystery was over. Then Denise said one more sentence. There's something else I never told you about that money. I sat back down. At my age, you learn that rushing a hard conversation only makes it harder. What else? I asked. Denise wiped her eyes. The inheritance was larger than I told you. I frowned. My mother left me enough money to save your company and still keep a retirement fund. I didn't understand. Then where did the rest go? She looked at me with the saddest smile I've ever seen. I gave it to Leah. I blinked. When she started college, she was drowning in student loans. She and Daniel were struggling after they married. I paid off her debt and helped them buy their first home. I sat there speechless. You did all that by yourself? She nodded. I didn't want our daughter beginning her adult life carrying burdens we could remove. I looked around our kitchen. Same table. Same old clock on the wall. Suddenly my entire marriage looked different. For years I'd thought I was the provider. The protector. The truth was that my wife had been quietly protecting all of us. So why tell me now? I asked. I wasn't going to. I raised an eyebrow. Then she smiled weakly. Victor got tired of keeping secrets. He said a marriage shouldn't reach retirement with hidden chapters. I actually laughed. My brother always did have terrible timing. Denise didn't laugh. What if you're angry? I reached across the table and took her hand. I am angry. Her face fell. I'm angry that you carried this alone for 15 years. Tears filled her eyes again. I'm angry that you didn't trust me enough to let me thank you. She covered her mouth. And I'm angry that I spent years believing I built everything by myself. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then I squeezed her hand. But I'm not angry at your love. She started crying again. I moved my chair beside hers. At 58, I know something I didn't understand at 40. Marriage isn't keeping score. Sometimes one person carries the weight while the other doesn't even realize there's a burden. The real danger isn't sacrifice. It's silence. The next morning we called Leah. She cried when she learned I finally knew the truth. A month later, Denise and I met with a financial planner. We laid every account, every document, and every fear on the table. No more hidden chapters. A few weeks after that, I sold part of my company and began planning retirement. Every Friday now, Denise and I have coffee on the back porch and talk about things before they become secrets. Funny how wisdom works. I spent decades building houses. My wife spent decades building the family living inside one. And in the end, we finally learned to build the future together. What if the secret threatening your marriage wasn't betrayal but a sacrifice made out of love? Sometimes the strongest husbands aren't the ones who stand alone, they're the ones wise enough to recognize who has been standing beside them all along.